Monterey Pop Festival, June 18th, 1993. 9:30 p.m. Prince stood frozen in the darkness behind the stage where Jimi Hendrix had changed music history 26 years ago. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he gripped his white Stratocaster, the same model Hendrix had burned on this exact stage. Through the curtains, 50,000 voices chanted, "Purple Haze," in tribute to the fallen guitar god. But Prince wasn't hearing worship. He was hearing judgment. And somewhere in the purple smoke drifting across the stage lights, he swore he could see Hendrix's silhouette shaking his head in disappointment. Tonight, either Prince would conquer the ghost that had haunted him for 25 years, or that ghost would destroy him in front of the entire music world. Have you ever stood in the shadow of greatness and wondered if you'd ever measure up? Drop a comment below, because what happened next at Monterey changed everything we thought we knew about fear, legacy, and what it really means to honor your heroes. And hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what unfolds when Prince finally faces his deepest terror. The panic attack hit him like a freight train. His chest compressed, vision tunneled, and his famous falsetto voice cracked to a whisper. "I can't do this," he gasped to his tour manager, Alan Leeds, who watched in horror as the most confident performer in music history crumbled before his eyes. This is his house. This is where he became immortal. Who am I to stand where he stood? Alan had seen Prince perform flawlessly in front of millions, dance through rainstorms, command stadiums with a whisper. But tonight, backstage at Monterey, Prince looked like a terrified child. Because this wasn't just another concert. This was a confrontation with the ghost that had shaped his entire career. To understand why Prince was paralyzed with fear on this particular stage, you have to go back to 1967. 9-year-old Prince Rogers Nelson sat cross-legged on the living room floor of his father's Minneapolis house, watching grainy television footage of something called the Monterey Pop Festival. His father, John, had been watching because Monterey was where careers were made, where unknown artists became legends overnight. Then a wild-haired man in a military jacket walked onto the stage carrying a right-handed Fender Stratocaster turned upside down. Little Prince had never seen anything like Jimi Hendrix. The way he made the guitar scream and weep and sing, the way he played it with his teeth, behind his head, between his legs. But it was the final moment that seared itself into Prince's young mind forever. After playing Wild Thing for nearly 4 minutes, Hendrix knelt down, doused his guitar in lighter fluid, and set it ablaze while feedback screamed from the amplifiers. "That's not possible," young Prince whispered, pressing his face closer to the TV screen. His father chuckled. "Son, that's what happens when God decides to play guitar through a human being." That night, Prince declared to his father that he would be a guitarist just like Jimi Hendrix. John Nelson's smile faded. "Prince, someone like that comes along once in a century. You need to find your own path." But Prince couldn't find his own path because he was obsessed with walking Hendrixes. Throughout the 1970s, he consumed every Hendrix album, studied every solo, practiced until his fingers bled trying to recreate those impossible sounds. When he recorded his first album in 1978, critics immediately labeled him a Hendrix wannabe. The comparison stung because part of it was true. Prince had built his guitar style on Hendrix's foundation, but the shadow was so vast that his own light seemed dim in comparison. For 15 years, Prince had dominated the music industry. Purple Rain had sold over 25 million copies. He'd proven himself as a songwriter, producer, performer, and musical visionary. But deep in his mind, a voice whispered that he was still just imitating his hero. That voice got louder every time someone compared his guitar work to Hendrix's. And tonight, on the very stage where Hendrix had achieved immortality, that voice was screaming, "Prince!" The sound engineer's urgent call snapped him back to reality. "You're on in 5 minutes. The crowd's getting restless." Through the stage curtains, Prince could hear the crowd's energy shifting from celebration to expectation. They'd been watching tributes to Hendrix all evening, but now they wanted to see the living legend who many considered Hendrix's spiritual successor. What they didn't know was that their spiritual successor was having a complete psychological breakdown in the wings. That's when Carlos Santana appeared in the shadows. At 46, Carlos had been at the original Monterey Festival in 1967, had watched Hendrix's legendary performance from the side stage, and had become a guitar legend himself. He took one look at Prince's condition and understood immediately. "Hey, kid," Carlos said softly, his voice carrying the wisdom of decades in the music industry. "What's happening here?" Prince looked up with wild eyes. "I can't do it, Carlos. This is sacred ground. This is where Jimmy became immortal. I'm just a pretender. Purple Rain is just Purple Haze with different words. I've been living a lie for 25 years." Carlos sat down beside Prince on a road case, his own guitar resting against his knee. "You know what Jimmy told me the last time I saw him? This was 1969, just a year before he died. He was exhausted, overwhelmed by the expectations. He said, 'Wayne Carlos, sometimes I feel like the music is too big for me, like I'm just the vessel, and someday it'll need a bigger vessel.'" Prince's shaking slowed slightly, but his breathing was still rapid and shallow. He was talking about someone else, not me. "No, hermano," Carlos said firmly. "He was talking about you. Music doesn't die with the musician. It finds new bodies, new voices, new guitars. Jimmy didn't burn his guitar to end something. He burned it to transform it." From the stage, they could hear the crowd beginning to chant Prince's name. The festival organizers were probably panicking, wondering if their headliner was going to show up. But Carlos continued speaking in measured tones. "I was standing right over there," he pointed to a spot stage left, "when Jimmy lit that Stratocaster on fire. You know what I felt? It wasn't ending. It was blessing. He was blessing this stage, blessing all the guitarists who would come after him. That fire was meant to light other fires, not burn them out. Every note you've ever played, every song you've written, every crowd you've moved, that's Jimmy's fire burning through you. He didn't die to compete with you, Prince. He died to live through you." Prince's breathing began to normalize, but his voice was still fragile. "But I'm not him, Carlos. I'll never be him." "Exactly," Carlos said with a slight smile. "And that's why you're perfect for this moment. Jimmy was Jimmy. You are Prince. The music doesn't need another Jimi Hendrix. It needs the first Prince." The stage manager appeared, headset around his neck, looking frantic. "Prince, we need you now." The crowd's starting to get restless. Prince stood up slowly, his legs still unsteady. He picked up his white Stratocaster and stared at it, as if seeing it for the first time. Carlos stood beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "When you walk out there, don't think about Jimmy. Think about all the 9-year-olds watching on TV tonight who need to see that the fire is still burning, that it found a new home." Prince nodded and started walking toward the stage entrance. But halfway there, he stopped and turned back to Carlos. "What if I'm not worthy of this stage?" Carlos smiled. "Prince, you've been worthy since 1978. You just forgot. Now go remind the world what worthiness looks like." The walk from the wings to center stage felt like walking through time itself. Each step took Prince deeper into the history of this sacred space. The wooden boards beneath his feet had supported Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Who, Otis Redding. Legends had been born here. Careers had been made and destroyed, and now it was his turn to face judgment. When Prince emerged into the spotlight, the 50,000-strong crowd erupted, but he barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on the spot where Hendrix had knelt to burn his guitar. The stage lights created the same purple haze that had surrounded Hendrix that night in 1967, and for a moment, Prince felt like he was looking through a window in time. He walked to the microphone without speaking, strapped on his guitar, and closed his eyes. In the silence, he could feel the weight of 25 years of self-doubt, of living in someone else's shadow, of believing he was nothing more than a talented imitator. Then he opened his eyes and spoke into the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the venue. 26 years ago, an angel died on this stage so the rest of us could learn to fly. Tonight I fly for him." The opening chords of Purple Rain rang out across the Monterey Fairgrounds, but this wasn't the version anyone knew. This was slower, more deliberate, more spiritual. Prince wasn't performing, he was having a conversation with the ghost of his hero. By the second verse, something shifted. The tremor left Prince's hands, his voice grew stronger, and he began to move with that fluid grace that had made him famous. The crowd sensed the transformation and began swaying as one organism. 50,000 people united in witnessing something extraordinary. But it was during the guitar solo that the magic truly happened. Prince stepped forward to the exact spot where Hendrix had burned his guitar and began playing notes that seemed to channel both his own voice and Hendrix's spirit. The solo started with Hendrix-influenced bends and vibrato, but gradually morphed into something uniquely Prince. The crowd was crying, screaming, holding up lighters and phones, creating their own constellation of light. At the climax of the solo, Prince played a phrase that quoted Purple Haze, but instead of copying it, he transformed it into something new, something that honored the original while declaring his independence from it. In that moment, 50,000 people witnessed the birth of something unprecedented. Prince emerging from Hendrix's shadow not by rejecting his influence, but by embracing it completely and transcending it. When the song ended, the silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the crowd exploded with the kind of sustained applause that becomes part of music legend. People were sobbing, screaming, holding each other. They had witnessed something more than a performance. They had watched an exorcism. Prince stood at the microphone, tears streaming down his face, holding his guitar like a sacred object. "Thank you, Jimmy," he said simply. "Thank you for showing me that I don't have to be you. I just have to be me." From stage left, Carlos Santana emerged, his own guitar in hand. Without a word, he plugged in and began playing the opening to Black Magic Woman, but he played it in the key of Purple Rain. Prince smiled through his tears and joined in, the two guitars weaving together in an impromptu jam that lasted nearly 15 minutes. 2 generations of guitar mastery, 2 different approaches to the instrument, but united in the understanding that music is bigger than any individual musician. The crowd was witnessing history, the moment Prince stopped being Hendrix's spiritual successor and became his spiritual equal. After the jam ended and Carlos had embraced him on stage, Prince walked alone to the front of the stage. He knelt down where Hendrix had knelt 26 years ago, but instead of burning his guitar, he held it up toward the stars. "The fire doesn't die," he called out to the crowd. "It just finds new homes." Backstage 20 minutes later, Prince sat in his dressing room, finally able to breathe normally. Carlos knocked and entered, carrying 2 bottles of water. "How do you feel?" Carlos asked. Prince considered the question. For the first time in 25 years, he felt free. "Like I just came home," he said finally. "You know what you did out there tonight?" Carlos sat down across from him. "You didn't honor Jimmy by trying to be him. You honored him by being completely yourself. That's what he would have wanted." Prince nodded, understanding flooding through him. "I spent so long fighting his ghost, I forgot that ghosts aren't there to haunt you. They're there to guide you." The reviews the next day were unanimous. Rolling Stone called it the most emotionally powerful guitar performance since Hendrix himself. MTV declared it the moment Prince became immortal. But for Prince, the only review that mattered was the one he gave himself. For the first time in his career, he felt worthy of his own talent. The video of that night became legendary, passed around among musicians and music lovers as an example of what happens when an artist finally stops imitating their heroes and starts honoring them. It showed that the greatest tribute to those who came before us isn't copying them. It's finding the courage to be ourselves. Years later, when asked about that night at Monterey, Prince would say it was the moment he stopped being a student and became a teacher. He understood that Hendrix hadn't burned his guitar to end an era, but to pass the torch. And sometimes the greatest honor you can give your heroes is to carry that torch so far forward that it lights up places they never could have imagined. What shadow have you been living under? Whose ghost have you been fighting instead of embracing? Sometimes the thing we think is holding us back is actually the thing that can set us free. We just have to be brave enough to step into our own light.